Welcome to Sunday Live Spiritual Direction and Soul Care. So glad that you're with us again today as we continue our current journey called the Quest for Peace. We've been looking at 5 different parts of the quest for peace, talking about peace within, how to be an advocate for peace, how to act justly, offer mercy, and today we're going to talk about reconciliation, or how to initiate reconciliation. And I'm really excited about diving into that this week. We've been talking so much about not only the quest for peace, but we've been also talking a lot about how the journey and the quest and the desire and the longing for peace, the ability to cultivate peace within and between others and in our world, is really a deeply human desire, and it's a deeply human capacity. It's a deeply human not only longing but ability that we have. And we've been looking at not only kind of like talking about each part of it, kind of like in an overview, but we've been also looking at how different major wisdom traditions and religions have all talked about each component this way, which shows us that when you push past different religious vocabularies and different kinds of belief systems, we see this underlying deep wisdom and human understanding of what matters and what's important in that. And so we'll be doing that again today a little bit, as we've been looking at the wisdom that comes from different traditions, even as we talk about these different things. So today, let's begin, as we always do, with the most basic spiritual practice, a grounding practice, which is a peace practice, really, when you think about it, where we give ourselves the gift of breath and stillness. We give ourselves the gifts of breath and stillness, where we focus on our breath, where our minds come back home to our bodies, and we are one within ourselves. We're focused here on ourselves, our emotions, and what's happening within ourselves. We are choosing to lay aside the racing in our minds, the thoughts, the questions for a moment, and just to come home to ourselves as we ground ourselves with a simple breath and stillness. So I invite you to just find a comfortable place to sit, to have your shoulders down and back, relaxed, and to simply breathe in and out, to let our shoulders drop, and in and out. And in for a count of 2, and out for 4. And again, in for 2, and out for 4. And now in for 2, and out for 3, 4, 5. Do that again with a longer out breath. 1 in, and 5 out. And you are home with yourself as we breathe in and out. We've been talking about peace. Out. This moment of breath and stillness. This is peace, a moment of peace, a gift of peace. And out. And as you continue to breathe in and out, pay attention to the way your body expands and receives breath. And as you release, I invite you to also think about the word peace. What feelings do you notice arise in you, in your body, What sensations? Where do you feel it? Your head, your chest, your gut, maybe your shoulders. Where does your body respond to the idea of peace? And what feelings do you attach to those sensations in your body? Peace. Breathing in, breathing out. Let's conclude our grounding practice with a blessing. This is called the blessing that undoes us. On the day you are wearing your certainty like a cloak, and your sureness goes before you like a shield or like a sword, may the sound of all reality, the sound of God's name, spill from your lips as you've never heard it before. May your knowing be undone. May mystery confound your understanding. May the divine, the sacred rain down in strange syllables, yet with an ancient familiarity of a knowing born in the blood in your bones, the ear, the tongue, bringing the clarity that comes not in stone or in steel, but in fire and in flame, in the passion within. May there come one searing word, enough to bear you to the bone, enough to set your heart ablaze again, and enough to make you whole. Amen. All right. It's good to be together. It's good to do these grounding practices. Tell me how you feel. Tell me how you are responding to the concept of peace. What is your body saying to the idea of peace as we talk and conclude this fifth part of the quest for peace? I'm so glad you're with us, whether you're on the broadcast or on the replay. Put your comments in and let me know how it's going. Before we dive into the material that we've been looking at and talking about, I wanted to recommend and remind you again of this book that I recommended last week, Notes on Grief by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. It is a small but very potent, powerful book. It is a very healing book. It's about her journey as she responded to the death of her father, but I think it's a great book about grief for any kind of loss, any kind of grief. It really honestly and openly describes the observed experience of what someone can have and feel and experience in their bodies and minds and hearts and in their relationships. And I absolutely love it. So I highly, highly recommend it to you. And if you are the kind of person who is trying to really kind of has that sense of things are just not right in the world. I don't know how you can get through the last couple of years of pandemic and all the craziness without that sense. But this book as well by Eric Minton, it's called It's Not You, It's Everything. I'm still working through it. I recommended it a few weeks ago. I absolutely love it. It's honest, and it's also really good if you are kind of navigating and coming out of toxic religion or religious trauma. It really is good. So I recommend it to you, and I hope you'll pick those up and enjoy them and tell me what you think. If you dive into them, it'd be great to connect. Judy's here, and she asked, can you link that unknown blessing? It's so beautiful. Yes, I will create a link for you for it, and I will put it and post it on the Facebook page in the Facebook group this week. So yes, excellent. Always love to give you guys resources for the spiritual journey. I love that book. It's the blessing comes from this book that I use a lot at the hospital. It's called Circle of Grace, and it's a book of blessings for the different seasons. It's written by Jan Richardson, who is awesome, and it's an excellent resource for when you need some words of blessing for people that you love or care about, or for yourself. It's an excellent resource. So it comes from that book, Circle of Grace. So I'm recommending all the books today, but they are really, really good resources. So those 3 books, check them out and enjoy. So today we are wrapping up with part 5 as we talk about initiating reconciliation. And I just want to throw a caveat out, like some of us are hurting and some of us are still, some of that is fresh. And so initiating reconciliation might not be on your radar. That might not be something that you are open to or ready for. And that's okay. You don't have to. Just enjoy the wisdom and the ideas, but don't ever feel any pressure ever when we're talking about anything here that you need to like get it together or get on this program or do something more. That's what that book, It's Not You, It's Everything, is really about, that pressure in our spiritual lives to produce and do more and be fine and to matter and all those things. I'm not ever interested in perpetuating that. I'm kind of full up on that and I don't need any of that in my life. And so like, if there's any part of this section that's hard for you, or you just go, yeah, I'm not there yet, that's okay. Still come along with us, and maybe it can initiate some reflection for you. This conversation, maybe it can get your mind started on, what it might look like to maybe start to move toward that, but it's really okay. I never want people to ever miss that the spiritual life is not about forcing things. It's about unforced rhythms. It's about an unforced grace. It's not about like pushing so hard that you white knuckle your devotion and your development and all of that. So all that, just caveat today, for whatever reason, I feel like I needed to say that for whoever's going to be watching this or whoever's watching today. You just need to know the spiritual life is not about pressure. It's not about producing. It's about a journey. It's a process. It's not a production, and that's really, really core. So as we talk about initiating reconciliation, I think last week I shared some stories about offering mercy. And today I wanted to share some quick kind of vignettes too, because I think stories really help us better understand things a lot of times. In the healing traditions of Native American cultures in America, there is one tradition where medicine people, when someone is sick, they always ask 3 questions. They say, when's the last time you danced? When's the last time you sang? When's the last time you told your story? And so I think stories are really healing. They have really healing power, real healing power, and they illuminate things for us. And so, so here's some snapshots, some little stories about people who tried to bring reconciliation between themselves and people that have been harmed, or even people that they themselves had harmed, where they did this kind of work, owning kind of their own part in something, or recognizing that someone who had hurt people needed to be brought back into the community. Okay. There was a guy named Arno Michaelis who was a former skinhead. That means he was a neo-Nazi racist, and he was involved in all aspects of that. He has a autobiography called In My Life After Hate, where he explores his journey into becoming a neo-Nazi racist, and all that involved, and his journey out of it. He really examines his own story and shares it. Like, where did this hate begin? How did an alcoholic teenager suddenly become the central figure in a racist movement in the 80s and the 90s? And he later then created a nonprofit, an anti-racism, healing, racial reconciliation organization by the same name as his book, called Life After Hate. And the mission statement of this organization that he's dedicated his life to now is, Life After Hate is dedicated to inspiring all people, individuals, to a place of compassion and forgiveness for themselves and all people. So sometimes reconciliation involves coming to terms with the harm you've caused, right? Or the harm caused by your ancestors, right? We see that there was a woman after World War II named Claudia Kiesinger, whose grandparents both served in the army in World War II in Germany, supporting the Nazi cause. And so she then devoted her life to healing the wounds of the Holocaust. Her story is a story of hope and devotion, and most of all, just being open to the healing power that can come from above and from within, the healing power that is all around us and waiting for us to access it at any time, that we can choose healing and reconciliation and peace. We can choose forgiveness and love at any time. And she really devoted her life to that. So, sometimes a step toward reconciliation can just begin with a small act of compassion. A small act of compassion. If you remember, in our political world, Richard Nixon, first president to resigned in disgrace, brought great dishonor to the office of the presidency. When he left Washington, he left as a pariah and an outcast. Nobody knew what to do with him. And then there was the funeral of the long-serving senator and former vice president who had served as a vice president elsewhere, a man named Hubert Humphrey, and he was lying in state in the Capitol, and all these bigwigs in the political system at the time. It was like 1978, so it's like only 5 years or something, like less than that, right? It's about 5 years from when he resigned, and nobody knew what to do with him. And he came because he was a former president, so protocol meant he had to be there. But he was literally sitting in a corner by himself. Like, nobody would talk to him. Nobody would even look at him. Nobody knew what to do with this embarrassing person who had really damaged the country and damaged people's confidence in our institutions. And as he's sitting there all by himself in a lone chair, a person walks up to him. It was President Jimmy Carter. And he walks up and offers him his hand and shakes his hand and welcomes him. And he said, "Welcome back to Washington." And Newsweek magazine concluded that simple act of compassion and humanity really changed Nixon's future. And it was a turning point in kind of his long ordeal in the wilderness, So, like, it's interesting. So, like, how reconciliation can be about us going and working to repair what we've done. Reconciliation can be about us recognizing the damage of those who have gone before us and making it right, trying to make it right. If you want to think of a kids movie, Frozen 2 is about that, is like making right the damage done by ancestors and those who have gone before. It can be about, even though you personally weren't directly necessarily as involved, being the voice of compassion and rehumanizing a person and sharing and emphasizing someone's humanity and showing compassion, even to a person who may have hurt you or hurt others. Remembering and never losing sight of the humanity of a person is really key. I know Judy's on today, and Judy is in many different places and conversations online in different places. I see that theme in her a lot, talks a lot about seeing the humanity in another, and never forgetting the true deep humanity, the true essence of who that person is, as we go through. So that's part of what reconciliation looks like. Another person would say that we should always emphasize reconciliation and not resolution. A lot of times we think reconciliation equals resolution, but it's actually really unrealistic to expect everyone to always agree about things, to always agree about what happened, to always agree about how things should have been. That's not actually a realistic thing to expect, but reconciliation focuses on relationship. Reconciliation focuses on relationship, while a resolution focuses on problems. And when we focus on reconciliation, the problem starts to lose its significance and often can become irrelevant, because what matters is the person and our connection, right? The health and flourishing of each person, not the problem, right? Um, that's really key to reconciliation. So tell me what you think. I've kind of shared kind of different dimensions of reconciliation. It's a lot about healing and restoring relationships. It's about restoring our understanding of humanity and seeing each other fully, even those who we've been in conflict with, seeing and prioritizing their humanity, prioritizing the relationship. Um, and of course, like if the other person is absolutely committed to still engaging in harmful pursuits, well, then it's heartbreaking. But what they're saying is they want their way. And then that means that they're not actually involved in reconciliation. It means that they're wanting their way, and it might not be time for reconciliation. And so it's okay to withdraw from someone who is actively pursuing harm or actively, not engaging in a way that prioritizes relationship. You see, so like we should never feel guilty about that, right? Setting boundaries while a person is actively still acting in ways that is creating breakdown in the relationship, right? That's important to understand. But when both are ready or need to be brought together, we can see ways that reconciliation is about restoring relationships, healing connections, right? Healing old pains, making things right, right? That's all part of what reconciliation is. So tell me what you think. Tell me, in a little bit, we'll be looking at some questions for reflection too, so you can share there as well. But as you kind of process some of what I've talked about with reconciliation, let's dive into these other these scriptures, right? That we've been talking about, so we can see the deep human wisdom across cultures when it comes to peace and when it comes to reconciliation. Before we do that, let's look really quick. Judy has a really great comment here. She says, in the Netflix documentary, Keep Sweet and Obey, about a radical offshoot of Mormonism, the escaping young lady saw the horrific brainwashing and abuse of other girls like herself. What was really poignant to me is that some of these same girls later allowed the abuse of their own female children by the cult leader, even participating in rituals because they perceived themselves in double binds. I think radical reconciliation is realizing that even our abusers can be our other selves. It's not condoning the abuse or compromising with those that allow it, but it's recognizing we can all be brainwashed into thinking we are doing right while hurting those we most love. Man, that is so key. Yes, I think that is really good to signal, right? That we all have the capacity to harm, right? But even those who have harmed still retain their humanity. And even if you don't want to restore the relationship with them, or maybe you can't, or it's unwise, right? Too, um, part of our work is to see ourselves in each other so that we can radically humanize each other and ourselves, and to see ourselves with humility, right? Because like you may be really genuinely hurt, I may be really genuinely hurt, but we add to it when we add on that part of us that wants to dehumanize and hate the people who have harmed us, right? To not see them as complex human beings, and then to forget our own complexity, right? That's really good. So thank you. Thank you, Judy, for sharing that. That's really, really good. So with these thoughts about reconciliation and what it can look like, let's listen to some of these different writings, this ancient wisdom from different traditions that kind of get at this idea. Okay. In Hinduism, they say a superior being does not render evil for evil. This is a maxim one should observe. The ornament of virtuous persons is their conduct. One should never harm the wicked or the good or even criminals meriting death. A noble soul will ever exercise compassion even towards those who enjoy injuring others or those of cruel deeds when they are actually committing them. For who is without fault? Isn't that interesting? That's fascinating to me. In Buddhism, they say hatred does not cease through hatred at any time. Hatred ceases through love. This is an unalterable law. In the New Testament, in the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus says, if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you. Leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. And in the Islamic tradition, wisdom, they say, better and more rewarding is God's reward to those who believe and put their trust in him, who avoid gross sins and indecencies, and when angered are willing to forgive. Let evil be rewarded by like evil, but he who forgives and seeks reconciliation shall be rewarded by God. He does not love the wrongdoers. True constancy lies in forgiveness and patient forbearance. In Sikhism, they say, granting forgiveness, the perfect master unites us with the creator. So in forgiveness, they're saying you are united with the divine. Something deeply powerful and godlike is rooted in our reconciliation work, in our forgiveness work. And in the Baha'i tradition, they say, it is incumbent upon all people of the world to reconcile their differences and with perfect unity and peace abide beneath the shadow of the tree of God's care and loving kindness. So we see here across all cultures, right, there is a deeply human urge. There's a deeply human wisdom and yearning for peace that is expressed in all 5 of these dimensions. And we know that as we advocate for peace and act with justice and offer mercy to people, that then when we initiate reconciliation, right, we are doing something profoundly sacred, profoundly divine, profoundly healing. As like one of my mentors used to say, if it ain't healing, it ain't revealing. So we do the healing work, even when it's hard, even when our minds go, oh, I don't want to do that, right? When we push into reconciliation, we are pushing into peace. We are pursuing peace. We are questing for peace. And we may not see a person respond, but we know we have taken that divine road of forgiveness, of forbearance, of humanizing the person across from us so that we don't dehumanize ourselves in our hatred or our bitterness. Right. And I think that's what really a lot of times boils down to is it's not even about the benefit to the other person. Right. I mean, Jimmy Carter going and welcoming Richard Nixon back was clearly a healing thing for Richard Nixon, but it was also about Jimmy Carter not wanting to lose sight of Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter not wanting to be caught up in the mob of the moment, caught up in the rush and the urgency of the resentments. Right? Jimmy Carter didn't want to lose himself. So he knew that's what he needed to do. Right? And some people would say, oh, that was wrong. You know, it's like, well, was he supposed to be out in the cold for forever? You know what I mean? And no one else is worth losing yourself over. Right? No matter what anybody else has done, it may be a long road of healing for you, but it's not worth losing yourself in bitterness and anger for. You know, and that's really what I mean when I talk about like not letting our wounds, giving our wounds power, and not letting the disruption, the pain, the chaos, the traumatic moment, all of that. We can't let that become the point of reference for our understanding of reality, our point of reference for our understanding of ourselves and our lives. Right? You have to choose to get there, and you'll get there. If you're not there today, that's okay. But moving toward that and initiating reconciliation for yourself so that you don't lose yourself in the pain is so important. It's so important. Judy says, reconciliation means bringing one's lower mind to the higher awareness that the divine presence within oneself, one's real self, that we sometimes forget is the same divine presence in one's neighbor. Yes. Yes. It's like what the Quakers talk about, the inner light, right? The light of Christ, the Holy Spirit is in all of us, right? Even in the one who has hurt you. And so it's about seeing that and maybe at some point inviting them to rediscover it and not lose themselves in their harm, their hatred, their hurt, right? Their selfishness, whatever it is. Man, reconciliation is rich. We could talk about this all day, but so let's think about some, like maybe some questions, you know, like I've said each week, these questions, you can write these down if you're putting them in a journal and you want to reflect on them throughout the week and write about them throughout the week. Please do that. That's important. That's a really good practice for you to do. But even today, I'm just gonna like give us a chance to like think about some of these things. And if you have thoughts, throw them in the chat, like Judy and others are doing, um, or just ponder some of these things. So here's a question for reflection: why is reconciliation so hard? Think of yourself, for yourself, not theoretically, not abstract, not 30,000 feet, for yourself. Where has reconciliation been hard for you, and why was it hard? Why is reconciliation hard? Why is it hard for you? Why is it hard for us to do this? Right? Because sometimes the pain is so big, right? Right? Sometimes because the problem's really hard or harmful, right? But we can do it. We can do it. Why is reconciliation so hard for you? What do you think? What do you think is the barrier for you when you think of reconciliation? Here's another question. What is essential for reconciliation to happen? What is essential for reconciliation to happen? What do you need to do? What do you need to see in the situation? Have you been able to parse out the difference between reconciliation, which is about relationship, versus resolution, which is about problem solving or winning, right? Or getting what you wanted, right? You see? You know? What is essential for reconciliation to have happen? Jill says pain is so great and you just want to move in. You just want to move in. So what's, and then finally, what do you think of this idea that we focus on reconciliation versus resolution? Like, that's why I said in the last question, we have to kind of unwind, probably in whatever situation that you're thinking of, where do you have to unwind the difference between reconciliation versus resolution so that you can actually be free to really get into reconciliation? Because I think a lot of times it's not because we're bad, mean, bitter. It's because we're still merging those two together. And when we unwind reconciliation from resolution, it becomes so, I think when we really unwind that, it taps then into our natural hardwired compassion. It becomes easier to see the sacred reality and the humanity of the other person across from you, right? Where when we unwind those two things and we bracket out the problem for a bit, right? And we really drive into reconciliation. So what do you think of that? I think it's a great piece of advice, but it requires some work, right? It requires some awareness. It requires some development. But what do you think on this focus on reconciliation versus resolution? Oh, Jill clarified. She says, pain is so great and you just want to move on. Yes, you just want to move on. That's right. Right, because resolution is asking for something that life can't give us. You guys, like, life can't give us resolution most of the time. You can't undo the pain, right? You can't undo your mistakes, right? That doesn't mean we give up, but notice, like in the story of the Arno Michaelis, right? The neo-Nazi, right? He can't undo all the damage he did in the 80s and the 90s, but what he can do moving forward is work through reconciliation, right? He can't undo and resolve, go back in time and make the world like he didn't act that way. But he can, going forward, emphasize relationship, compassion, humanity, forgiveness, right? So yeah, it's big. It's really big, you guys. Judy says, a friend of mine and I have pondered the question, does blocking or going no contact with a narcissistic or abusive personality, not tolerating it, actually elicit or compel the abusive person's higher spirit or soul towards freedom? There seems to be some spiritually efficacious result, not just for oneself by going no contact if one can with overtly abusive individuals? What do you think? Yes, I do, because people who are committed to their course of action, especially like narcissists, right? They're not actually pursuing a relationship with you. They're not at a place to be a partner in the reconciliation process. They still have lost sight of their own humanity, or they have a warped understanding of your humanity in it. So yes, I think that's important. And maybe sometimes, and this is the thing too, like the people who harmed you can't be the people who healed you. The system that harmed you can't be the system that healed you. See? And so like if you are, especially with like a narcissistic personality, like you have to withdraw, right? Not only to protect oneself so that you don't give into bitterness and anger, right? But you can still send out the energy of compassion and love and forgiveness toward them, even over distance, right? And allow their journey to unfold, and let the people who can do the healing work with them come into their lives, and trust that story will be their story, but your story doesn't have to be part of their story anymore. So yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I think, yeah. And I think some people are brought to their senses when they do lose, right? You know, which then means that maybe they weren't narcissistic. Maybe there was just some harmful patterns that were taught, right? That have to be unwound for them, right? And then maybe that learning helps us see that maybe we weren't dealing with what we thought we were dealing with. Maybe we were dealing with just someone who was profoundly harmed and warped, you know? I really see that, you see that in toxic religion all the time. We're told certain things are good and other things are bad. And then we realize that it's totally warped our ability to see ourselves and others. And so we've participated then in harm of others, and we didn't even realize it until later, right? And you weren't meaning to be harmful, right? There was just some things that had to get unwound. Right? So yeah, I think that's really, really good, Judy. That's a really good question. See, reconciliation is multidimensional. It's never easy. It's never a simple formula, right? There's so much going on when it comes to reconciliation. So let's wrap up too with our call for action today, because I always have in this journey given you something practical to do today or this week to work on. So here's your call for action. Think about someone you want to reconcile with, and take time to just write a prayer about what you desire to have happen. If you aren't really overtly religious, you could write a prayer that says, "May we," and then write it out, write it out. Think of the person you want to reconcile with. Don't think about the current thing that you're still fresh on, that you don't really want to reconcile with, that you still want resolution or to win on. Don't do that. Think about something that you would take time. Don't just jump into it. Think about who would you want to reconcile with, and what would that look like, right? And then write it out as a prayer. Judy was asking that question about setting boundaries, and she responded, yes. The system that harms cannot heal. I find this true even with broken governmental systems. When one experiences, say, injustice, suing, or just using just another flood system is not the ultimate answer. The ultimate answer has to be inner spiritual movement, more powerful than matter. Yes, absolutely. So when you do this call for action today, think about not just what you want to see happen between you and the person you want to reconcile with, but maybe spend a lot of time describing how Judy beautifully describes it. What is the inner spiritual movement within you that you would want to see, that you would know you would need to have move within you first before you moved into what would happen in the relationship? There's an inner reconciliation back to your own humanity and your own sense of compassion and your own sense of forbearance and forgiveness first, right? That's something, you can't just make your inner state dependent on someone else's actions, words, deeds, admission, whatever, right? What's the inner spiritual movement that has to happen within you that will then prepare you for reconciliation with that person, and then what you want to see happen between you, right? One's own sense of worth, Judy says. Yes. All right. So that's your call to action today. So let's wrap up with a closing prayer that was written by a guy named Reverend Richard Ham. And it's about making peace. And this is our blessing to end. Oh God, in many and various ways, through various great traditions, you have called us to be peacemakers. Help us to understand this word peacemaker as a verb, not as a call to peace as the mere avoidance of conflict, knowing that there can be no true peace apart from justice and right relationships. Help us to pray for peace and to work for peace by seeking reconciliation with you, with one another, and especially with those who are very different from ourselves. Help us to love one another beyond all difference and to seek justice for one another beyond all human boundaries of class, gender, race, nationality, religion, politics, and every human condition. Teach us the humility that allows us to understand one another deeply and the compassion that leads us to sacrifice for one another's sake. Amen. It's good to be together as always on Spiritual Direction and Soul Care Sunday Live. I cannot wait to continue being with you in the coming weeks. Can't wait to unveil what our next journey will be. Join our growing community. Come and join our Facebook group where you can connect with people there as well, and other resources will be there. I've loved this community. Always love the wisdom that you share. Judy, thanks so much for being on. And add your comments, even if you're watching on the replay. Would love to hear from you. Have a great week as you go forth in the quest for peace. I know you will grow and flourish this week as you walk each day. Have a great week, and let me know how you're doing.